Hey everyone, welcome to our new chapter about positive and negative integers. Today you're going to understand what an integer is. You're also going to be able to give me examples of negative numbers and negative integers in the real world, and you'll be able to know what an opposite number is. So let's get started. In 5th grade, you guys, and well, in all your grades before 6th grade, you use this little number line right here, right? And you had arrows going in both directions, but mostly you stopped at 0, correct? We are going to blow your mind in 6th grade, and we're going to start to extend that number line into the negatives. All right, so basically these number lines down here were whole numbers. What we're going to talk about now are integers, which are these whole numbers, but also their opposites, the negative versions of themselves. So that's what an integer is. It's a whole number, and it's its opposite, negative opposite twin. So kind of think of 1 and like its evil stepsister, -1, right? They're opposites, but they're still 1 away from 0. So some other whole numbers are -2, not whole number, integer. Another example of an integer is -2 because its opposite is a whole number. 7 is an integer. 1 is an integer. Okay, any whole number is also an integer, but also its negative friend. -500 is an integer. 4,592, integer. Okay, so be thinking of whole numbers and their opposite twins, the negatives. Those are integers. Let me give you an example of what is not an integer. Anything that has a fraction or a decimal, positive or negative, if it's got a fraction and decimal, it is not an integer. We'll get to that in a couple days, what exactly they are. So -2.1, not an integer. 1/2, not an integer. Okay, so only beautiful whole numbers and their opposite twins. All right? Because we're going to be doing a lot with number lines, I want to show you some different examples of number lines. Number lines don't always have to count by ones. Sometimes number lines can count by 2s. Sometimes number lines can count by 5s or 10s or 50, or I've seen number lines that count by 100. Okay, number lines don't have to always be horizontal. Number lines can also be vertical. And when you see a vertical number line, it's the same as a horizontal, it's just flipped. You still have 0, but now your positive numbers are above and your negative numbers are down below. So those are all the types of number lines that you're going to see in this chapter. Okay, I've already used the word opposite a lot, so let's be really specific about what an opposite number it is. What an opposite number is. So the opposite number is the same distance from 0 as its opposite. So here we have a number line, and we can see that +3 and -3 are opposites because, here's the definition, they are the same distance from 0. So they're like exactly the same, but they're completely opposite because they're the opposite distance from 0. So that is what opposites are. Another fun fact about opposites is that you can actually use the negative sign to mean opposite. So -3, you can also, oh, let me uncover my face, move over face. -3 can be the same as the opposite of 3. So there's 2 ways that you can say this number right here. You can say -3 is the opposite of 3, or you can also say 3 is the opposite of -3. That just confuse you? Let me show you this. -3 is the opposite of 3, right? Now look at this cool one right here. You got 2 negatives. So a way you could say this is the opposite of the opposite of 4. Anytime you see a negative sign, you can also just say opposite. Okay? Let me give you some examples of what I'm talking about. So the opposite of 2, here's 2. What's the same distance from 0? Oh, negative 2. So the opposite of 2 is negative 2. The opposite of, here's negative 4. The opposite of negative 4 is positive 4. All right. Now, let's do the opposite of 3. So let's try that one. Here's 3. Let's do the opposite of 3, which is negative 3. But then we got to find the opposite of that, which is back to 3. So the opposite of 3 is actually back to 3. We did like double opposites. Okay, so one way we could write that is the opposite of 3. And that just puts you back to 3. Okay, what about the opposite of negative 12? If we're down here at negative 12, the opposite of that is 12. And then the opposite of that is back to negative 12. So it's negative 12. The opposite of negative 12 is back to negative 12. So we could write that as, here's negative 12. The opposite, ooh, I don't know if this is how you do it. The opposite of the opposite, maybe you'd use brackets. The opposite of negative 12 brings you right back to negative 12. Kind of a cool concept. Don't need to get a whole lot of time into it because it's just a small little part. But one more opposite question. What is the opposite of 0? Dun, 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 dun. You're right. The opposite of 0 is just 0. 0 is the only number that has its own opposite. 0 is kind of a funny number because you can debate. Is it an integer? It's not really a whole number, is it? And it's also not the opposite of a whole number. So there's lots of debate about what 0 really is. Okay, you can think of 0 as not being a number at all. It's just circling a lot of nothingness. Random. We're getting into deep subjects today, aren't we? Let's go into negative integers. When have you seen negative integers in the real world? We may have discussed that already, but let's talk about some real examples that I've seen them and that you'll see them. Now that we've talked about negative numbers, you're going to see them pop up everywhere. So here's an example. Yuma, Arizona is 70 feet above sea level. Well, what does above sea level mean? Well, that is a positive 70. You're above 0. You're above sea level, right? We looked at that number line, and when we have a vertical number line, the positive numbers are on top. So when you are above sea level, you're in the positives. Now, what does 0 mean? If Yuma, Arizona was at 0 feet, that means that they were at exactly sea level. 0 feet is sea level. And then you can go negatives to go below sea level, right? If you're swimming or snorkeling or scuba diving, you're in the negatives. You are in underneath sea level. Sea level is right at where the sea meets the land, okay? So there's an example. Negatives would be below sea level. All right, what about, can I play this film? It's not going to let me. Darn it. All right, it's an epic video of the quarterback getting sacked by Chase Gardner, okay? So what kind of, is that a positive or a negative integer example? Well, if the quarterback is getting sacked, he's going to go negative 10. Okay, what that means is he started at the line of scrimmage and he went back 10 yards and got stopped. So he had negative 10-yard gain. He had negative yards. What does 0 mean in a football instance? If you had a 0-yard gain, that means you stayed right at the line of scrimmage. You didn't advance. You didn't lose yardage either. So 0 would mean there was no loss or gain on the play. They stayed exactly where they were. All righty? So in sports, you're going to see negative numbers. In temperatures, this might be one of the biggest ones you saw because we live in Utah where it gets into the negatives, right? But in Minnesota, it had a temperature of negative 25 degrees below 0, which would be negative 25 degrees, right? So what does 0 mean when we're talking about temperature? 0 means, well, 0 degrees. You can be above 0 degrees or below 0 degrees. Okay. Okay, another cool thing that I saw that I want to show you is I found this map that was from January 5th a few years ago, but it's fun to see all of the positive numbers. Look at this number line right here. There's 0. We got all these positive temperatures here. And then purple, gray, whitish is the negatives. You can see why there's that Minnesota right there. There's the negative 25 degrees. Minnesota's cold, okay? Those northern states are very cold. There's a reason why lots of people go to Florida in the winter or Southern California, right? It's a lot warmer in the winter when in northern Utah, it's 13 degrees positive, but that's still not very warm, is it? So you're going to see a lot of negative numbers in temperature. Another example you're going to see a lot is with banking, with money. You guys are going to be adults. You're going to be dealing with bank accounts, checking accounts where you withdraw and deposit money. So if Larry withdraws $30 from his bank account, that means he takes it out and it is no longer his. It's no longer in his account. So if you withdraw money, that is a negative. Negative. Withdraw means you're going to take it out. It's no longer there. But if you deposit money into your account, that means you have money in your account. You have more money into your account. So if you ever see the word deposit, that is a positive. You are adding money to your account. Withdraw means you're taking it out. It's no longer there. It's a negative. So if Larry withdraws $30 from his account, that's a negative 30 on his statement. If you see 0, it means you didn't take any out, you didn't withdraw, nor did you deposit. There is no change in your money. Okay. Last one. If you are familiar with golf or miniature golf, there is par. There's above par and there's below par. If you're a good golfer, you're better than par, so you actually have a lower score. If you suck like me and you keep having to hit the ball, you're going to get in the positives a lot, which in golf is not good. You want to do the least amount of strokes to get the ball in the hole, right? So you actually want a really small number. You can even go in the negatives in golf. So if Trisha's golf score is 7 strokes below par, that means her score is -7, which is very good. Mine is never really in the negatives. All right. So here's your test question. Now that we've talked about it, you're going to figure this one out. Which situation could be represented by the integer -10? Is it that Anna spent $10 on a CD? Is it that the temperature was 10 degrees above 0? C is Dylan received a $10 gift certificate. Or D, Cody got a 10-point bonus on his test. Which one is a negative integer? A, right? If you spend money, you lose it. You're now in the negatives. You have $10 less. Perfect. Good job. All right, here's a couple more for you. I want you to circle in your notes either yes or no. Are these negative number situations or not? Carrie gained 200 points during a game show. In order to wrestle his weight, Ben needed to lose 15 pounds. Marcy deposited $100 into her savings account. Desmond made $850 in his summer job. Renee lost $50 while playing the Monopoly. Or Joseph withdrew $20 from his account. Circle yes or no, and then go on to the next slide. Never mind. I'll go on to the next slide and show you the answers after you've got them circled. Here are the correct answers. Get some. We have a lot of practice today so that you can understand these negative numbers. I'll see you back at the mastery table. See you later.